that you are not fixed to a division. You don't need to be with just one set of men. I can place you anywhere I need you. Osrith hoped that her disappointment showed on her face. She liked being head of a group of men, to learn them, for them to adapt to fighting protocol, to get the best out of them. Osrith, Aldhelm concluded, that you have returned to us is indeed fair news, and he dragged his stool back, standing up and smiled as if genuinely pleased to see Osrith. He seemed to be, and Osrith was genuinely pleased to see Ethelred's chief advisor. Think about it, Miral encouraged, for he had known Osrith for longer, and sensed her disappointment. Now, wait in the armory. Ethelred will need to see you today to discuss the matter of Sigefrith. In the end, Osrith went to the stables. She had just cleaned herself, ready for the Lord Ethelred's audience. But she felt that some work would do her good. He would not send her back to Winchester, Osrith reckoned, with some degree of certainty. Indeed, Ethelred had wanted her back in Mercia. But, he may have issues about her arrest of one of the guards, whatever he had done, for she was not Mercian, and Ethelred was strict on following the codes of practice. It put them distant from the Danes, he had always said, but he was not so fixated as Alfred was, with the Wessex law. At least Ethelred offered some flexibility, though the rules were followed. Nonetheless, the Anglish, of Bernicia, had codes too, and probably the Eastern Middle Angles, but Osrith knew little of them, for long had they been in the hands of the Danes and no Anglish government existed in either of these ancient kingdoms now. As Osrith maneuvered a pile of used hay into the center of the courtyard, she noticed a young child, a girl of about the age of 11, skipping about near the gardens. She stopped what she was doing and watched her seeming to bend to the flowers and talking to them. She had red hair the color of flames, reminded her of Findlaith, Malmuir's first husband, king of the Ailch and High King of Ireland. The girl looked up, as if sensing she was being watched, and then had no fear in coming over to talk to Osrith. "Are you a new guard?" she asked, not in the least apprehensive of talking to a guard. "No." Osrith shook her head. "I am a captain." "No," the girl corrected her, with all the confidence of being right that a lot of children possessed. "You must be a guard. Captains don't clean the stables." "This one does," Osrith replied. "For the job needed doing, and I had time." The girl laughed. "You talk strangely." "Are you a Briton?" "I am English," Osrith replied. "From Alba." "Have you heard of that land?" "Dragons come from Alba," the girl replied. "I am looking for the dragons in this place." "And do your parents live here?" "Is your father a lord to the Lord Ethelred?" The girl laughed. "My parents are both dead. My brother is here." She bent towards Osrith. "My name is Eadith." Osrith replied, holding out a hand. Eadith looked at it, then took it, and shook it gently. "And your brother?" Osrith soon found out, but not from Eadith's lips, for the girl's brother had crossed over to them and put a hand on her shoulder. "You are required in the hall," Eadgilf told Osrith, in a tone that sounded like he was telling her off, and he took Eadith by the shoulder, and led her off through the garden and in through a door that took them to the chapel. Eadith looked over her shoulder just before they went in, and smiled sadly at Osrith. She was halfway to the hall, entering it through the corridor that led from the courtyard, when Eadgilf caught up with her. "You were supposed to be in front of the Lord Ethelred by now, so he could talk to you about your arrest." "I'm going, aren't I?" Osrith asked, walking past two guards who knew her, and who greeted her with a nod and a smile as she passed. As they got to the door, Leofstan, her oldest warrior, pulled aside his spear with another man on the other side, and opened the door, his face also breaking out into a grin when latent recognition entered his brain. "You should have been here," Eadgilf hissed, to a silent hall. That, of course, brought Eadgilf and Osrith to the attention of Ethelred, who glared at Eadgilf as he continued, oblivious to the situation around then. "And what the hell were you about to do to my sister?" Osrith found herself shocked. His sister? But recovered quickly. "What was I going to do?" she repeated. "We all know what," Eadgilf snarled. Osrith collected her thoughts as she saw Ethelred raise a hand. "What with, Captain?" Osrith shot back, and those who knew her laughed, including Miral and Aldhelm, who gave a polite, accumulated cough. Those who did not stared at Osrith in amazement. I was cleaning the stables, and a young girl came over to talk to me, my lord, Osrith explained to Aethliad. And I did nothing to her except talk to her back. So I have no idea what the Lord Eardgylf means. We all know what could have happened. Who are you anyway? Eardgylf seemed unaware that the entire court of Mercian lords were standing about them. A captain of Mercia, Osrith retorted. Auxiliary captain, she added, and I am sworn to Lord Aethliad. But I do not of a cock. More laughter. Even the Burgard had a glimpse of humour at his lips. Is that because they were removed by the last brother looking after his sister's honour? Eardgylf demanded. If you are concerned about her honour, Captain, perhaps she should have remained at home. A shriek sound made Osrith look to Eardgylf, who had drawn his sword. Osrith made a glance to Aethliad, who waved his hand in a disinterested manner. Put it away, Eardgylf, he told the man, and Osrith noticed with some satisfaction that Aethliad had not prefixed the man's name with the title he had claimed himself. As he was sheathing it, that was when Osrith attacked, running across the wooden-floored building and leaping onto the man, who fell flat down onto his back. As Osrith began to pummel his face with her fists, a discordant murmuring fell across the lords. Osrith, get off the man. Aethliad's bored voice cut through the undercurrent. When he admits he was wrong about me, she declared, and made to punch his face. Eardgylf had caught hold of both of her fists and was pushing her back, so she had butted him at the top of the nose. He let go, his face streaming with blood. I said get off him, Aethliad shouted. Osrith stopped and clambered off him. But Eardgylf had decided to take a knee to Osrith's testicles, and he would have caused her a good deal of pain, if she had any. She stumbled back, but got to her feet quickly, and edged back towards Miral. Just stop, Aethliad declared, his hand waving. Eardgylf, she is a woman. Osrith, just say what you need. He glanced at a piece of paper in his hand. What did this ... Sigefirth do that you hit him on the head with a cudgel and arrested him? Attempted rape on a daughter of one of your shawls, Osrith replied. And has the Regild been paid? Aethliad asked this of Eardgylf. It has, the man agreed, glowering at Osrith, his mouth soaking up a lot of blood from his node. Then, that is the end of the matter, Aethliad stated. The man shall hang in the morning, and you will go back on duty with your men, Eardgylf. And that should have been the end of the matter. But instead, Eardgylf stepped towards the Lord of Mercia. By what authority did this ... woman have to take over my division? He asked. There was a hush now, as the lords listened to Aethliad. He looked at Osrith, and then back to Eardgylf. She is my oath-taker. She has sworn to Mercia, and as such, has been extremely prodigious in ensuring my law has been carried out. But, Osrith noticed, the man standing before his lord looked remarkably confident in himself, and he placed his hands behind his back, as if he were about to advise Aethliad. Osrith, he began, looking at her. That is your name? It is, Osrith replied. And is what the Lord Aethliad said true? Being female, it is. Then, unfortunately, Eardgylf paused, for if it, as a female, you have no jurisdiction in Mercia, or any of Mercia's outside interests. Never. I don't believe it. Really? These were the words Osrith did catch in the buzz of hasty discussion amongst the lords. Aethliad held up a hand, and silence fell again. I do believe nothing is written, Aldhelm put in. Your father, though a law-keeper, was, however, he was a debtor. This does not mean his keeping of the law was not true. Eardgylf had not moved. Cleverly, Osrith thought. It was as if he were advisor to Aethliad himself, rather than a possible lord fixed in a captain's role. Tell me, Eardgylf, Aethliad replied, you are going to keep bothering me until I let you speak, are you not? Eardgylf bridled at Aethliad's indifference, but continued anyway. The law code, as written by Offa, states that a man may bring a commitment to his lord, not a woman. Eardgylf threw back his head. Men of Mercia, he quoted, earls and free men, and those men under oath to the king. Or in your case, lord, he added, with equanimity. No women are mentioned. I accept the warrior Osrith as one of my men, Aethliad replied, his eyes flashing, as he engaged with Eardwulf. She had already served me well for a number of years, and has never wavered from her commitment. Am I not right, Aldhelm? Ethelred looked across to his advisor. Aldhelm looked slowly between Ethelred, to Osrith, then to Eardwulf. Indeed, my lord. She has been a model of expediency. Osrith watched as Ethelred looked back to her, and then to his demoted lord. There you have it, Eardwulf, a model of expediency. But Eardwulf had not moved. Instead, he seemed to have more to say. Ethelred sensed it too, and rolled his eyes. Then, if she is, as you say, one of your men, she was therefore a threat to my sister, and therefore I had every right to challenge her over her intentions. Osrith still stood with her arms folded. If she was worried, she did not show it. But it worried her anyway. Ethelred was not head clever like Alfred. He was bored and disinterested in rule, and must be bothered by how much time his kingdom took up. Such rulers could make mistakes. But you could not think. Aldhelm trailed off. It's physically impossible for her to be any threat in the slightest to your sister. Ethelred shuffled in his seat, aware that his lords were watching him pass judgment in this cognitive dissonant matter. Eardwulf, he said, exasperated, yet trying to sound patient, Osrith is one of my men in terms of her qualities on the battlefield. I do not accept she was a threat to your sister. But the logic still holds. Eardwulf was staring at her. Lord Ethelred, may I speak? She asked. You may, he said, waving a hand in a disinterested way. As long as you don't drop your breeches to prove the point. Ludica here might die of a heart attack. Titters of good humor. It boded well for her, Osrith thought. May it be noted now that Osrith Lackland has been declared here one of King Ethelred's men, and hereby is entitled to dispense justice on behalf of the king. Osrith made sure she looked directly at Eardwulf as she said this, and ignore the glaring error she had deliberately made. If it made her look like an ass-licker, she didn't care. As such, Osrith continued, any threat that I pose to your sister, I most humbly regret. Osrith bowed to Eardwulf, as the given sign of deference that he had been slighted. Your move, Osrith thought. You need to name your penalty. They all knew it. Lord Ethelred, Eardwulf began, this man, in your service, was indeed once a female who belonged to someone, husband, father, sister. Yes, yes, Ethelred replied, waving a hand at him to make him hurry. While I make inquiries, for the good of Mercia, whence she originates. Osrith looked across to Aldhelm, who made no move or action as Eardwulf made to continue. You will make no inquiries, Ethelred interrupted him, and Eardwulf fell silent. Yes he will, Osrith thought, and it will not take a literate, well-connected man a long time to discover that not only is she not Lackland but that she was last seen in Alba, and that Elfric, her uncle, still lived. He will do it, for spite. Now, may I make a suggestion? It was Aldhelm who had stepped forward now. Yes, yes, get on with it. Ethelred snapped, clearly having lost the will to remain interested in the proceedings now. Aldhelm stepped closer to Ethelred. May I suggest that the Lord Ethelred makes a decision for the good of our kingdom? For Mercia. Osrith looked across to the would-be king. When she found out what it was that he had decided, in about 10 minutes' time, when all of the lords had left, Osrith really wished Aldhelm had just let Eardwulf choose. But he did not. Indeed, Eardwulf, Ethelred dismissed. You will leave it with me. 88,888,888. You are no assassin, Aldhelm cautioned Osrith, as she readied an available horse. His face was grave, still and serious, and he placed his hand over Osrith's, as she pulled the bridle over the horse's face. This black beast has been the best she had ridden since Finno Lion-Tagged had taught her to ride, or rather, not fall off, through the lands of Stirling. May I formally now decline your offer of auxiliary captain, and perhaps you can give it to one who deserves it? Osrith bit back the words, trying not to let her emotions spill out. How could he, after everything she had done for the kingdom of Mercia? It is a job to do, she justified, making sure she acted well enough so that she could leave with dignity. It is how I get to be in a place I want to be. A consolation reward for failing to reach Alba, she told herself. It is how I cement my place here. Aldhelm shook his head, and placed his other hand on her arm. His eyes on hers. Osrith, you have a place here, in perpetuity. His voice was low, steady. You are more loyal to Mercia than ever anyone could be. He glanced at the gate, as wisps of snow began to sprinkle down onto the courtyard. I wonder how it could be so. Perhaps you came from here, before you were Lackland? Perhaps, Osrith replied, as she leapt onto the horse. No saddle for her. It made staying in all the worse and found the old lie on her tongue. Though I remember my own family when we were in Alba, before the Norse murdered them. No doubt, Eardgilf will be able to tell me, and to make up many lies about me. She bent her head to Aldhelm. Stay, Osrith, I will go alone, Aldhelm insisted. But Osrith shook her head. And be shown to be a fool by that man? It is not as if I haven't killed a woman before, she added, her horse's head rocking backwards and forwards, anticipating leaving. Osrith hadn't, unless there had been women amongst the Norse and Danes she had ever fought. How could he think I could harm his sister? Aldhelm did not answer at first. Instead, he pulled himself up on his own horse, his beard as brown as the bay's own coat. They got a good 10 miles on the way to Oxford before Aldhelm slowed. It is needless to say to you that you play a very dangerous game for yourself being a warrior, Aldhelm began. And now, because of this, you have been tricked into the assassination of Ethelred's wife by the man himself. Tricked? Osrith asked. It is my guess, he asked you to do it, first, before he found a more convenient ruse. Aldhelm's horse shifted its hoofs, and Osrith noticed because the man had said nothing. It could have been worse, I suppose, Aldhelm continued. He has ... appetites. Osrith scoffed. Just because I have a cunt, I am not begging for it to be filled by a cock. Aldhelm said nothing, just pinked a little at the top of his sideburn cheeks. They rode on, and winter bustled snowflakes at them. They would go to Gloucester first, and then north, to Saltwick. He is greatly annoyed by his defeat at Kinwy, Aldhelm said, at length, when they had ridden for about an hour in silence. Osrith had been brooding on the task, and wondering how ironic it was that she had spent so many hours, when she was at Winchester, dreaming of ways of dispatching Alfred's daughter, when now she couldn't think of a single decent way to do it. Perhaps there were no decent ways. The road gave way to countryside as they skirted the city of Gloucester, and Aldhelm told Osrith how, as an independent mercenary, Ethelred had chosen to invade the northern lands of Wales, and how he had been defeated and had to ask the southern kingdoms for help. They, in turn, begged for assistance from Alfred. So, in effect, the long-held desire to expand beyond Offa's Dyke had failed and Ethelred had become beholden to his father-in-law. In addition, Ethelfled had chosen to live in her estate at Saltwick. From there, she could oversee the northwestern interests of Mercia, including incursions beyond Whittling Street and reclaiming territory. So Ethelred was looking east. The reeve of the city will show us somewhere we can stay for the night, Aldhelm assured her, but he seemed disappointed to be shown the stables. At least the breath of the animals always Osrith feel warm on cold nights, and she readily climbed the loft stairs. Perhaps there is somewhere else we can go, Aldhelm said, looking around the straw-strewn loft with disdain. Other than turn the steward's family out of their beds, you mean? Aldhelm replied. It will do. We are only here for one night, not for a diplomatic meeting with the earldorman. He pushed himself along away from the hatch, and hung the lantern above them. It will be good to be discreet. Osrith watched as Aldhelm pulled blankets from his pack and fashioned one into a pillow before putting his head upon it. Osrith pulled her cloak around herself and turned with her back towards him. How would she do it? To challenge Ethelfled to a fight and killing her would draw too much attention. In her sleep, that had particular advantages, and Osrith was certainly stronger than the lady. She could hold down a cushion to her face or slit her throat. Osrith had never had the chance to do this, and she was not sure that was the best route. If she could not pull it off effectively, then it would be too much of a blunder. Ethelred would certainly send more guards, maybe on the pretext of further guards for the Lady of Mercia, only to discover she was dead. Osrith needed to leave Ethelfled in a position she could be found, rather than disappeared, or dead in a fire. but not too obviously murdered, if it could be seen to be an accident. Osrith's mind worked on. An accident held a certain appeal. The tragedy of the Lady of the Mersons ran better off the lips of the story makers than dread murder. But how could she stage an accident? You do not have to do this. Osrith turned in Aldhelm's direction in the darkness, for the lamp was nearly burned out. She could hear his breathing in the coldness of the stable loft. And if I don't, I have failed, she replied. A long-ago memory of her and Domhnall of the Uineal talking in a loft similar to this filled her mind. Then, they had wandered the glen of Orkney, and the Morrigan had come and rinsed her soul by her very presence. No Morrigan here, though they were close to Cymric lands. The Morrigan seemed to be strongest in the north, Osrith had noticed. Do you have any other ideas than my going through with it? In the semi-darkness, Osrith turned in his direction. Aldhelm reached out and touched her hand. It was warm. I do not know. I cannot understand your choice. Then you must know I am in a position that gives me few choices, Osrith replied, then pulled herself up to a sitting position. I can do it. I do not want you to be made into a murderer. Aldhelm shifted in the straw. We could tell her, and let her escape. Then you have no need to be a murderer yourself, Lord. Tell her and let her escape, Aldhelm repeated. That is the most palatable. Osrith stared into the darkness as the course of action now decided settled between them. So, tell me, why do you want her killed? Why did you not say no? My country needs a leader. It is being enveloped by Wessex, and Ethelred is no more than a puppet to Alfred after his Welsh disaster. He drew his hand back from Osrith and lay down. Mercia is all I have, he added. I have been lucky to still remain a lord under Ethelred, after everything. He decides so much on whims and feelings. His voice trailed off in the darkness, and then Osrith leaned up, searching for Aldhelm's hand in the darkness. When she found it, she searched for the other, pushing her fingers through his as she leaned upwards, to kiss him. Aldhelm did not respond as she pressed her lips to his, so Osrith leaned over him, her body over his, taking his face in her hands, her palms touching his beard. It was too dark to see his reaction, and Osrith kissing the man again, and deeper and more intensely when she felt him responding. He let out a sigh before taking her hands from his face, and he pushed Osrith back, folding her hands together, and pushing them away from him. Osrith, he said slowly and deliberately, while I would with no hesitation acquiesce to your offer, Aldhelm continued, looking at her with his still, intense fixed look that he gave when he was being serious, and believe me, I would desire you. I believe that down that path would only lead to unhappiness for us both. Then more softly, patting her shoulder, added, I value our friendship, which could be lost. Would not be helped by that. Aldhelm leaned away from her. Now, if you will excuse me, I will leave you to rest. But he did not turn away from her immediately, for Osrith had had time as she listened to formulate the next words she was going to say, and said them quickly as she saw Aldhelm get to his feet. As we are friends, then I would prefer my friend to stay by me this night. She nodded and reached up to pull his hand. Aldhelm sat back down next to her. I promise not to kiss you again. Now I see what Threthirdwylf thought you would be to his sister, he quipped, and they both laughed. You worry about your task? Aldhelm asked, when he was lying next to Osrith bundled up in his blankets as she was her cloak. Not the task itself. She will be easy to dispatch. Just the aftermath. Is Ethelred prepared for that? Is he prepared that by removing Alfred's daughter in Mercia the repercussions? In the darkness, Osrith felt Aldhelm shuffle nearer to her, and she was grateful for his warmth, for it was becoming a cold night. I think not. I think her role is central to everything. My parents were killed by Danes not far from Tamworth. They are a scourge to us and our way of life. Then we must have a plan, Osrith replied. It must appear that I have been thwarted not because I could not do it, but because she got wind of danger and fled. They lay in silence for a while. Osrith could hear Aldhelm breathing, but it wasn't the slowness of slumber. He wasn't going to sleep. May I assure you, it is not because I do not find you an attractive woman, Aldhelm said, as if the idea had been on his mind all that time. I just do not feel that it would be the right course for us to undertake. Osrith may have exhaled a little too loudly, because Aldhelm continued to explain further. Osrith's heart sank. It was clear he didn't want to. Why prolong the justification? But Aldhelm was doing just that, and she listened to him in silence. There is another reason I would not wish to lie with you, Osrith, Aldhelm explained, quietly. I believe your heart is with someone else. When Osrith said nothing, Aldhelm prompted. I have seen the way you look at the Lord Utad, for example. Very perceptive, Osrith thought, and then aloud said, if I wish it, it can no more come true. My life does not really shout domesticity. But no, the Lord Utad, traitor to Alfred and outlaw of Wessex, no, not in a million years. I mean, Uke. She made a noise like a pig getting a surprise poke by the farmer, and Aldhelm laughed. Not the Lord Utad, but someone. When Osrith did not answer, Aldhelm added, I wonder why you are so hard on yourself. Because after this, I must go, Lord Aldhelm, Osrith replied, admitting more to her commander than she had dared to admit to her own brain. Please, not Lord, not to you, Osrith. And, where must you go that Mercia cannot accommodate you? Because of what Eardwulf said, she clarified, not answering his question. I do not know where I come from, but he is the sort of man who will find something, and I will be shipped off to somewhere. If he has enough evidence I came from here or from there, set me up, have it prearranged. Osrith felt herself losing her temper a little, and she forced herself to calm down. What was it Eric Thurgilson said? Meet defeat and success in the same way? It will not come to that, Aldhelm sought to reassure her. You are Ethelred's oath-taker, and are of Mercia. You are auxiliary captain, should you wish to change your mind on that one. I won't. And I would not have suggested THST if I thought you couldn't do that role. Those squads of men are vital to our defences. Will you at least come back to Aylesbury first? And Osrith's heart melted a little more. A humanitarian was a rare thing in the world. Because it's you who has asked, Aldhelm. Yes, Osrith agreed. So, let us discuss how we attempt to feign taking the life of the Lady of the Mersons. Who was there? Did she get away before we arrived? Did she slip away in our presence? And if she did, how? What preparations had she made? Did they go somewhere pre-planned? Near? Far? On the straw? Osrith turned over to his direction, and laid a hand on his arm. Osrith, may I say what a good man you are? Osrith said, then tucked her hand away. If you knew me, Osrith, you would not believe so, Aldhelm replied. Perhaps you too should not be so hard on yourself, Aldhelm, she said, and patted his hand once more, before they talked into the night about how to stage a failed assassination of the Lady of the Mersons. 88,888,888. Winchelcombe. The Lady Ethelfled was pacing her study, her sword not yet sheathed. Osrith noticed. I will send word I am to be helped. Those nuns have a keep. I will be quite safe. Quite safe, unless you undergo a siege, Aldhelm suggested. The land is narrow, and there is little ground to run to, should you need to. And who do you think will chase me to a nunnery to murder me, Lord Aldhelm? Perhaps the same man who sent us? Osrith was not known for subtlety, and Ethelfled was affronted by her bluntness. Ah yes, my husband, Ethelfled replied, giving Osrith a shriveling look, which had absolutely no effect on her whatsoever. So, why did you come? She asked Aldhelm, still threatening him with her sword. Too flimsy, Osrith thought, as she scrutinized the steel. Fine for close combat, but put that in the way of an axe and it will become an undersized seax. My husband's hound. He may not kill you, Osrith growled at Ethelfled, offended on Aldhelm's behalf. How dare she dismiss him like that? I may, yet I am every bit a mercenary as the Lord Aldhelm. Ethelfled turned her pale brown eyes disdainfully to Osrith. My husband's Gaelish bitch. With a thrrrm, Buet was out and the lady's sword was on the floor. She gave an outraged look at Osrith. Though I do not like the way he treats you, The law of Mercia says he is king, Osrith reminded her. Ethelfled looked at her sharply. Or as close to king as possible. Osrith picked up some silver coins which were on Ethelfled's desk, holding one out to her. Your father ruled next to Sheolf. Mercia knows that Wessex would like to rule it and fears for its safety. You have Elfwin, she could be queen after you both. You fight well, she could be taught by you. Mercia would be happy. But Ethelfled was not. What you say is an outrage, she stormed. But stopped, when Osrith raised Buie again. Then take my sword from me and strike my head from my shoulders, Bean, Osrith offered, her heart sinking when she saw Aldhelm bridle. May I say, Aldhelm interjected, pushing away Osrith's sword. I have come to realize that the land would be poorer without the Lady of the Mercens, Aldhelm told her, as Osrith stood motionless, only her sword blade vibrating very slightly in front of her. I will accompany you to this monastery, Osrith offered. Why must I come with you? Why must I come with you, you say? You have to escape and survive your escape. Mocking laughter entered Osrith's voice added, and you never will survive with a pot-cooled blade and 2 maid-servants. You are nothing but a... But Ethelfled broke off when Osrith's sword point traced a line over her neck. I can kill you. I would, if I could. And as quick as she had removed Buie, Osrith put away her blade. And I will, if you let down this country of mine. It is adopted by you, Ethelfled retorted.